Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the media for coming this afternoon on such short notice. We wanted to discuss three matters that relate to customs. I think all of these issues have been in the media in recent times, and some of them have been, shall I say, a little controversial. So I want to announce this afternoon, some decisions that the government has taken with respect specifically to the issues of registration of electronics on leaving the country and the whole question of the customs, the implementation of the customs tariff law. I have with me the Honorable Marco Archer, the Minister for Finance and Economics. I will try to address the sort of high-level issues, and if there are more detailed questions that members of the media have, Minister Archer will be able to deal with those. First, with respect to the registration of electronics upon departing the airport. As was noted in the story, and I think the editorial in the Caymanian Compass which followed, this is something that's been in place for at least 30 years. I think what has occurred actually has been some confusion about what it is that customs are trying to do. The registration of electronics on leaving the Cayman Islands is not a mandatory requirement. It is a facility which will accord the user or the owner of the device to be able to point to when they return and are questioned about when this device was purchased and whether or not duty has been paid on it. But it is not mandatory in any respect. Like any other good that is imported or brought into the Cayman Islands, when someone goes away, on, whether they go away on vacation or go away on a business trip or come back, it is always open to customs officers to say to the individual, please provide me with evidence that this was not recently purchased, and or if it's been purchased, that duty has been paid on it. That's with respect to anything that's brought in to the Cayman Islands. But we know that there are concerns because the perception is around that somehow you have to register your telephone, your iPad, your laptop, whatever electronic device before you leave the Cayman Islands. That is not the case. It is a facility, I repeat, it is a facility that is available to those who wish to use it, but it should always be remembered that the onus is on the importer, for lack of a better expression, to satisfy customs that whatever is being brought back into the country is not something that has recently been purchased abroad and the required duty has been paid. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. You don't have to register your devices, electronic devices, but the onus is on you when you return, if you're asked by a customs officer to produce evidence that you've already paid the duty on it, or you bought it from locally, and of course from an entity which would have been required to pay the duty in advance. So that's the first issue. The second issue, and perhaps more complex issue, is that of the customs tariffs law. I think most people will remember that the customs tariffs law was passed in April of 2012, but was not brought into effect until March this year. The reason for the delay was to deal with a whole range of administrative issues, and particularly the development and implementation of something that's called the TRIPS system, which will allow the codes that are part of the customs tariff law to be able to be put in place. Now, it's been 4 months since the customs tariff law has been in effect, and while there were complaints from the very start about the additional administrative burden and complexity of the process, And the government has been monitoring that very carefully. We know that change is always met with some resistance, and most people are not happy about it. And so we wanted to make sure that we had given the system a chance to succeed. It is clear to us and those in customs, actually, though, that the present system is still the subject of a great deal of anxiety. It's still taking a great deal of time on the part of importers, and that something has to be done. Some adjustments have to be made to it because it is really making it very difficult for businesses. So over the course of the past few weeks, we have been having discussions about how we can adjust the system to make it achieve what government wants it to achieve in terms of being able to capture statistics, but at the same time not make it so difficult and expensive and time consuming for the importers and users of the system. I perhaps should say that this is not, the customs tariffs law is not based on something that was just developed locally, but is based on the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, which is something that has been produced by the World Customs Organization and is in place in more than 250 countries across the world. So this is not, as I say, some arbitrary thing that has been the product of the imagination of local people. And so we feel that it would be a retrograde step to completely abandon the system. The statistics which are captured are important for a range of reasons, not least of which is that it gives government the ability to see what is being imported when government needs to look at customs duties and a whole range of other issues and matters like that. So what we've decided after consultation with the Collector of Customs and her deputy is that with effect from the 1st of September, the law will be amended so that first we will reduce the overall number of codes, which are now at 5,000, by what is called rolling up a number of them. So in other words, so that the breakdown is not as detailed as is currently the case. And secondly, for those who do not wish to actually have to go through the codes and record individually each item, customs will undertake that responsibility. We are proposing to introduce, with respect to that, a small administrative fee of $5. So in practical terms, what will happen is that importers will use the same form that they're using now. They will be required to produce the declaration and the invoices. If they can leave their coding to customs for an administrative fee of $5, that coding will take place back office and at a distant time from the actual submission of the form. So in other words, you can produce those documents, pay your duty, and walk away, and then leave it to customs to go through the rather tedious exercise of putting in the various codes with respect to the items that you have imported. For bigger operations, such as the supermarkets, who have already put in place a computer system to deal with this, they can continue to do that. Obviously, they won't get charged the administrative fee because they'll be submitting the codes themselves. But they will be able to use a more simplified set of codes, because I think the proposal is to about halve the number of codes from about 5,000 to somewhere between 25 and 103,000. Obviously, the detailed work on this is yet to be done, and so I can't, nor would I attempt to go into that level of detail. But the objective of the exercise, obviously, is to ensure that government still has the ability to capture the statistics it needs, but at the same time to facilitate business and importers, and to avoid the challenges and problems that have become, I suppose, fairly commonplace over the course of the last few months. And finally, I just need to remind everyone that as of the 1st of August, the 1st of this month, there is a new duty rate with respect to certain categories of imported goods, and that this reduction from 22 to 20% is for the benefit of, is applicable to licensed traders, both retail and wholesale. And this affects nearly all categories of goods that are offered for sale, for retail sale in the Cayman Islands. I believe I've covered all of the issues. If Minister Archer thinks I've left out anything important, I'm sure he will he will fill it in. But absent that, we can proceed to take questions. As I intimated, though, we are not prepared at this stage to go into the details of precisely how all of this is going to be done. But prior to the new provisions coming into effect on the 1st of September, we'll obviously issue a more detailed statement, either by virtue of a press conference or maybe a press statement, explaining precisely how the new system is going to work.
I'd just like to add that further to what the Premier has said, the responsibility for completing the customs declaration forms has always been the responsibility of the importer. It is just that in years gone by, the government always fulfilled that role and therefore coded the forms with respect to the tariff heading. So now what we're saying is that it is still the responsibility of the importer, but customs will provide that service for a very small fee of $5. For those who wish to do their own coding, well, then they are able to do so. And once the tariff codes are rolled up, well, then it becomes even easier for the individual to do their own tariff coding. With respect to the large importers, yes, they already have in place a template which they will be using, so the online processing, and therefore their process should be that much quicker. And they're using a bank bond system whereby they will simply submit their declaration forms electronically, and customs would then clear their goods because, of course, there's a bond in place. So their process would be expedited. So anyone using a bond and processing their declarations electronically, the system is extremely quick for them. This change that we're about to make should resolve all the issues that we've been hearing about with respect to the length of time spent at customs, because you either code for yourself, which is quite quick, and deliver your forms, pay the necessary fee, or you deliver the forms to customs, pay the necessary import duty, and they would then do the coding for you. So we're looking at a greatly reduced time for anyone visiting the customs hall and making use of that service. The time should be greatly reduced, which is obviously of great importance to everyone concerned. And with respect to the reduction on duties from 22 to 20, that went into effect as of 1st of July. So therefore, we've been enjoying those benefits for quite some time. Hopefully, those of you as consumers have been enjoying the reduced prices, and we'll do as much as we can as time permits and our financial positions allow for us to do. But we are listening and we are doing the best we can.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. I did say 1st of August. It should have been, as you said correctly, 1st of July that the reduction took place. Questions?
Carsley Fuller, Radio Cayman. If I could start, how about with the last thing we were talking about, and you'll have to forgive me because I have been out of the loop for a while. But is there anything that forces the retailers to pass that 2% savings on to the consumers, or is that a good faith kind of thing?
I'm hoping competition will do that. But there is no government mechanism for price control, so no.
Okay. That was my only question on that. And then to clearing the customs, do you have any indication of, you mentioned that this process of using these codes has worked in other countries, up to 200 other countries. Do we have any idea of why it kind of didn't work in Cayman?
I don't know that I'm qualified to comment on that. Maybe the collective customs has a better idea, but I think part of the issue has been that there was no I won't say no requirement, but there was no practice in place really for the importers to actually code. Customs was doing that under the old scheme, but there were only 300 categories of code under the old scheme. But Cayman is Cayman, and I think we've given it as long as we can to settle in, and it hasn't. I mean, I'm very conscious of the fact that the only human being who actually welcomes the change is a baby with a wet diaper. But you still have to listen to what the consumers of your product or your services are saying, and we've heard this lament long enough and hard enough, and the cries are not receding. So it's clear to us that we have to make some adjustments.
So Customs has done the coding before this new changes?
Go ahead, Mark.
Can I just add to that?
Sure, of course.
The law, Section 16 of the law, always required the importer to complete the customs form. I think it says that to complete the form in an entry appropriate to such goods in such form and manner and containing such particulars as customs may require. And the declaration form has a column for the tariff code. As the Premier said, in years gone by, the government, through the Customs Office and the Economics and Statistics Office, always did the coding for the importers. So therefore, with the introduction of a new system and the responsibility to do their own coding, it is understandable perhaps why some traders or some importers would have thought this was a really burdensome process. But it's just really taking on a responsibility that the law already required of the importer. Now, and of course you can imagine that as the economy continues to grow, the population continues to grow, this could become quite a burdensome task for the government. I recall the days in the Economics and Statistics Office seeing the bundle of, the mountain of importation documents. And as that grows, of course, it is much better that the importer, who is familiar with what it is they're importing, actually put in that code. But we are willing to code for those importers who feel that they can't be bothered to do that task. And it's a fairly small fee because, of course, the task can vary. You can have one declaration form with many invoices and many items on that invoice, so the task can vary from entry to entry. So $5 is a very small fee for that type of service. We can't continue to do it forever at no cost. And of course, making use of the portal, the online portal, would also reduce the time that one spends dealing with the Customs Department. And of course, if there's a bond in place, again, like I've said, it really simplifies the process and expedites the clearance of your goods.
So you don't anticipate there being a shortfall with the number of staff? I mean, you're talking about could potentially be a lot of documents. You think you got what you need to get the job done?
To start, we will allocate as many as we can afford in terms of staff. But it is just to get the system in place and to assist the importers at this stage until they become more familiar with the codes themselves, because of course eventually most people import the same items over and over, and they will then be able to look at their entry form and see what the code is for that particular item. The next time they go to customs, they might decide, I'll just enter the code myself. I know what it is. I've seen it before. So we expect that over time the volume should be reduced, or the demand for that service from customs should be reduced.
So are you saying then that the end goal is to encourage importers themselves to fill out all the documents, as opposed to having customs agents do it?
Customs agents not being customs brokers, I just want to clarify that. Yes.
Customs officers.
Customs officers. Correct, yes. Over time, ideally, we would prefer that the importer did complete the form for themselves. But in the short term, or for the next, however long it takes, customs, being familiar with those codes, would provide that service for a small fee. But like I said before, we hope that in time, it is something that the importer would be able to do for themselves if they so desire, to avoid paying a small fee. There are some who would obviously do it for themselves, the larger organizations who would be using the online portal and would have already created their templates. Also, other importers who might walk into customs could create their own templates, and therefore it simplifies the process for them. We're trying to speed up the process and get people in and out of the customs hall within a short period of time, and get their goods from the dock to their stores within as quick a period as possible.
And coming back to the first matter, you're saying that it's not mandatory for someone to fill out that form to register the electronic device, but at the same token, you're not getting rid of the process either. At the end of the day, what message is it that you're sending to the traveler? Are you saying it's in your benefit to fill out this form, or what is it? What's the message here?
Well, the message is that the onus is on the traveler or someone who's resident here to be able to prove the provenance of the device that they have. In other words, did they buy it in the Cayman Islands and therefore duty has been paid on it, or did they just pick it up at Best Buy on their way in? If they just picked it up at Best Buy, duty is payable on it. So the process of registration is which is a process that's been around for many years, is something people can avail themselves of if they wish. But what we wanted to do was to dispel the perception which now has been created that somehow it is mandatory that you register all of these things, and that if you don't, they are liable to be seized by customs on the way in. That's not the message at all. But I mean, customs officers have a duty to ensure that goods that are brought into the Cayman Islands, bought somewhere else, if they don't fall within the allowance, the duty is payable in it. Doesn't matter whether it's an electronic device or whether it's clothes that you bought. They're all subject to the same system.
So you're probably aware that the Chamber of Commerce has been quite vocal on this matter, and the argument is that in this day and age, having an electronic device, be it a mobile phone or an iPad or a laptop or something, it's something that we always have on our person as we're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone going to have to then prove every time that they come back home to the Cayman Islands, this is something that I've had with me for the last 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever it may be? It's that in itself cumbersome.
Well, that's not what happens in practice. Anyhow, I haven't heard any complaints that that's what customs is doing, but that's relatively easy to do. If you left Cayman last Saturday and you came back today and your laptop looks quite new and customs say, can you demonstrate to me that you didn't just buy this at Best Buy on your way in? You open the laptop and you show them an email from last week. It's not a difficult thing to prove. No one is saying that you have to produce receipts for these things. If it's been in use, it's been in use. But those of us who live in Cayman, I mean, we know there are some people who abuse the system. Most of us don't. And the message that the government wants to send is that Cayman is visitor-friendly, travel-friendly jurisdiction. We've been working with customs. We've been working with immigration. They have something of a balance to strike all the time, because they have a duty as a law enforcement organization to ensure that the wrong things don't get brought in. But they also have a duty as collectors to ensure that the system isn't being abused, that people are importing stuff in volume for either their own personal use or for sale, on which duty should be paid, and that duty is not being paid. But the unfortunate perception that has developed since the news article and the editorial is that somehow people are being required to go to the customs the day before they travel, register these things. If they don't register them, they're going to get seized. That's not the case at all, and that's what we want to dispel. That's the impression that we want to dispel.
Furthermore, if I may just add to that, while it is not mandatory, and I want to keep stressing that, it is not mandatory that you register the device before you travel. It's not mandatory. It is to your benefit, your advantage, that you register your devices. As the Premier said, when you re-enter, it's a simple case of saying to customs, oh, I already registered this device, so no problem. Or for your own benefit. You travel, you come back home, and for some reason that device is stolen. Well, then you have a record somewhere that you own this device, and you have the serial number, whatever identification method is used on that device, that you can say to the police, here it is, this one is mine. I have many electronic devices. I haven't yet taken a photo and made a record that I could prove to the police that it is mine if someone stole it. So that is one way of looking at it. And then on the other hand, even if this system of registration had not arose, customs still has a responsibility to check anything that is entering the country, because we have seen over and over again, when a criminal wants to import something illegal, there is no end to which they will try to conceal it. So we can't just say that you can't look at someone's device and say, oh, ignore it. It could very well be stuffed with an illegal narcotic of some sort. So it is not mandatory, but it may be to your advantage one day to do a simple process of registering it online to prove to customs it is yours, or even the police if someone stole it from you. It's not mandatory.
Well, let me just say this at the risk of getting in trouble. I haven't registered any of mine, and I don't intend to. So I'll just have to prove to them it's mine. I've had it before.
Nikki Watson, Cayman News Service. So what you're saying is registering is not the only way to prove that you've had it for some time. If it looks a bit battered or it's clearly you've had it for a while, it's not going to be a problem.
No, it's not going to be a problem. And as I said, if you've been using it before, if you open it, you can show you've had a phone call on it or a text message on it before the date that you came in, whatever the case may be. So, and as I said, we certainly, and it seems sometimes like ministers are the first line of complaint, but we haven't heard had any feedback that people are being given a hard time over electronic devices at the airport. We hear lots of things, but we haven't heard that one. So.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm happy to take another one from.
It's a quick question. The $5 for the customs officers to do the duty codes, is that for any size importation, or is there a limit?
It's per transaction.
Okay. Oh.
It's an administrative fee to cover the additional resources that are going to be necessary for someone to carry out this coding exercise.
So if there are a number of items on it, it'll be $5 just for the.
Yeah, it's a transaction.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's a transaction.
Yes.
Okay.
I think
somebody. The only other thing I'd like to say is that next week we will be making some announcements with respect to immigration, the immigration process as well. Again, part of our overall efforts to improve the visitor experience to Cayman. So I'd hope to be able to make them this afternoon, but we still have some processes to go through before I can do that. But I hope by this time next week we'll be able to make some announcements with respect to the immigration process as well. Thank you.
Thank you.